Towns and cities across the country are now on alert for mosquito-borne illnesses, including the rare Eastern equine encephalitis virus. Plymouth, Massachusetts is closing parks and fields at dusk. Other towns are urging people to avoid going outdoors at night during those hours of peak mosquito activity. More now from ABC's Ike Ajachi.
Tonight, during the final weeks of summer, Plymouth, Massachusetts, south of Boston, closing its parks and fields from dusk till dawn. One of 10 communities in the state where families are at high or critical risk for becoming infected with the Eastern equine encephalitis virus, a rare but potentially deadly mosquito-borne illness.
Key thing is there's no vaccines or treatment for triple E, so prevention is really very critical.
Starting this week, crews will spray for mosquitoes from the ground and from the air in more than a dozen towns. The CDC says although most people who get the triple E virus have no symptoms, a small percentage develop brain inflammation, and about a third of those people will die. And many survivors suffer long-term neurologic damage. In 2019, the threat of the triple E virus impacted Friday night lights in multiple states. Connecticut's Windsor High School among those rescheduling their football games and other outdoor activities to before dusk to limit exposure to mosquitoes. That year, there were more than 36 cases of human triple E virus across 10 states in the U.S., the highest on record. At least 12 people died. And in New York City, crews spraying in Manhattan and Brooklyn this week to combat another mosquito-borne illness, the West Nile virus. Dr. Anthony Fauci among those in the U.S. now recovering from that virus. Mary, officials say be vigilant about practicing protective behaviors. Use repellents with EPA-registered active ingredients. When outdoors, wear clothing that covers the skin and reschedule outdoor activities to avoid the hours between dusk and dawn.
So how interesting, right? There's a lot of things to look at there. The curfew is one of them. The no symptoms is the other. Of course, there's no vaccine for this as well. They'll tell everyone out there. So anybody out there who's a conspiracy theorist, they'll go, oh, well, see, it's not about getting you vaccinated. This is a real story. They don't even think to themselves that the mosquitoes are actually flying syringes, because they are. But let's talk about the curfew for a second. Like I said earlier, how they make this stuff voluntary, right? Does anybody remember when we had the COVID lockdowns and what the curfew was even about? What is it not? Does it spread more at night than during the day? They just came up with this whole curfew thing because this is what the future looks like, and they're conditioning you into it. They had the effective nighttime curfew of COVID-19, so we all needed to find a safe haven, quarantine when the sun went down. We all know that stores were closing, like Home Depot would close at 6 o'clock at night. We know restaurants weren't even allowed to be open, right? The grocery store would close at sundown. And now, of course, these are other things that they're easing people into, because the future is dusk till dawn in your cell, just like a prisoner, right? What's even more interesting about it is, maybe I'm speaking out of place here because I'm not an expert on mosquitoes, but my common sense meter tells me that aren't mosquitoes at night relatively not as active as they are during the day? Don't mosquitoes rest at night? Now, that doesn't mean that you won't find mosquitoes out at night. We've all been outside at night and got bit by mosquitoes, but not as much as the day, right? So why is it at night? Why are people just told to stay inside during the day? You got to also love how this isn't just for right now. This is until first frost. So they're telling you to stay locked down and do this from dusk till dawn until October at the earliest, when the first frost comes, which usually does not come on the East Coast in October. It usually comes in November. It can come in October, but we're talking about at least a month and a half to 2 months of people who are going to be voluntarily locking themselves inside because of fear of getting bit by mosquitoes, without asking any questions about, hey, wait a minute, how come these guys like Bill Gates have all these patents and are talking about creating GMO mosquitoes to send out into other countries? Hey, wait a minute, wasn't it Bill Gates who was talking about production of a transgenic mosquito as a flying syringe to deliver protective vaccines to people via mosquito, so mosquitoes could bite people and vaccinate them? No way they would try to do something like that. Now, if you understand all of this with nanotechnology and what they're trying to get inside your body, of course, this has nothing to do with protecting you from any type of an outbreak out there. All this has to do with, of course, is getting nanotech directly into your blood by getting mosquitoes injected with this nanotechnology and then creating them in a laboratory and sending them out in mass, right? Dumping them out of chemtrails, dumping them out of the sky. Really, they could dump these things out of jets and nobody says anything about it. So shouldn't people out there start connecting the dots? I know it's a very difficult time period for people to critically think because people are so dumb. But when you have a guy like Bill Gates who is front and center, who's supposedly a tech guy, right? Then he becomes front and center for vaccines. You connect the dots yet with technology, with Microsoft and vaccines. And then what he's working on now is carbon vacuums, sucking the carbon out of the air. Big advocate of climate change, telling us that we don't need to have cows anymore. We need to eat plant-based, get estrogen in our bodies. And at the same time, he's developing mosquito vaccines, to help humanity. Nobody's suspicious yet, right? And now on top of that, this is what maybe might be most concerning to me about this, is I'm not saying that this isn't real. I'm not saying that this virus, that the mosquitoes aren't actually there. Of course, we know they're using the propaganda to condition you, to make you fearful, to make people voluntarily lock themselves in, because this new world order is going to be based on a lot of people voluntarily doing this stuff. That's what just happened with COVID. There were no laws in place that told you couldn't do this or do that. They tried to tell us that some, governors were signing this and signing that. But if the people rose up and everybody went against it and said, we're not staying inside, what were they going to do? Arrest the entire state, arrest the entire country, arrest the entire earth? No, they weren't going to. So it is psychological, right? But we know people will voluntarily, through fear, give up their rights. And what concerns me here is this. State officials are announcing plans to spray for mosquitoes in sections of Worcester and Plymouth counties due to EE. So they're going to be spraying from the skies, which tells me that they're likely going to actually be dropping mosquitoes from the skies. And in fact, some of the stuff that's going to be getting sprayed is not going to be helpful to getting rid of mosquitoes. It's actually going to be harmful to human beings, right? They're going to be spraying chemicals from the sky. Now, we know we get morning, afternoon, and evening baths from our government via chemtrails and geoengineering, but for them to come in and say, well, state officials are announcing plans to spray for mosquitoes. So they're going to spray chemicals in the sky. What are the effects of that? Are they going to announce what the effects of that are? Are they just going to say, hey, stay inside on Wednesday and Thursday because we'll be spraying? What if somebody is outside when these chemicals are getting dumped onto civilians? Who is giving these people the authority to do this? Nobody. They're taking the authority, pretending that they're elected, pretending that we put them in power and they're doing what's best for us. And all they're doing, in addition to enslaving us, is killing us, dumping chemicals on us, poisoning us, unleashing mosquito syringes on us, right? And keep in mind, too, another thing you could look at with this, and I've covered this a million times, and my videos are on the website here on Plum Island. But Plum Island is only 95 miles away from this location in Massachusetts, okay? 95 miles. Now, Plum Island did say that they left that location and went, I believe it's Kansas that they claim to be in now. But they have many of these Plum Island-like locations where they claim that, they're animal disease centers, right? That's what Plum Island, we were told. Plum Island is an animal disease center. Then you look at some of the pictures of these mutated dogs and all types of animals that we've never seen before, just showing up on beaches right off of, the coast there, off of the East Coast. And they go, well, we're doing animal disease, testing over there to prevent any of this stuff. And of course, they're creating it because that's where Lyme's disease was created. For anybody out there that doesn't know, it came directly from Plum Island. And Lyme's disease, of course, was sent out to Lyme, Connecticut. That's the name where Lyme's comes from. And that's where it began in 1976, they tell us, right? When humans started getting infected with Lyme's disease, right off the island of Plum Island. So my point is that we're not looking at Plum Island saying Plum Island is shut down. None of us should be. They're doing other things at Plum Island with the electrical grid now that I've covered in the past, where they are doing experiments on what would happen if the grid went down at Plum Island conveniently. But they still could easily be, doing things from Plum Island, and they are. And there's many of these animal disease centers around the United States of America where they're not doing these experiments. Well, what is the excuse they give us, right? They're like, oh, we're doing experiments on an animal, right? And you're like, what? You're doing experiments on mosquitoes? What? Yeah, we're doing experiments. We need to send them out into the public because some people can't afford to get vaccinated. So we're going to put vaccines in mosquitoes and send them out on the public. And then you go, wait a minute. What, isn't human rights being violated here? What if people don't want the vaccine? Well, everybody should have it because we say they should have it. So we're going to call it a vaccine, but it's really nanotechnology. We're going to just have you get bit constantly as we create these things. And not to mention, I don't know about any of you. I'm out in the Midwest now. I don't know if any of you are seeing some of the bugs this year that are out there. Like, I've seen some bugs that I've never seen before, and I've been alive a long time. I've seen a lot of bugs. I can't name every bug, but there are clearly a ton of bugs that bite out there that are not normal bugs. They're brand new bugs, brand new species of bugs, because they're creating this brand new species of bugs. And nobody asks questions, go, where does that emerge from? Where are these new diseases emerging from? How are these diseases showing up all over the place, right? Well, because this is all being created by these people in laboratories. That's what they're doing. That's what they're doing with our tax money. That's what they're telling you is for the betterment of humanity. These people were involved in the tech industry and then involved in the science field and the medicine field. That's the easiest way to explain it to people, is what does one have to do with the other? Why are all these guys in big tech so involved on censoring speech against vaccines with big pharma? Why is big pharma and big tech in bed with each other? Why is Bill Gates, who supposedly founded Microsoft, whose father was on the board of Planned Parenthood, why is he involved all of a sudden with vaccines and carbon footprint and carbon vacuums to suck carbon out of the air? What are they telling everyone they need to kill their cows, right? Telling everyone we can't eat meat anymore, that we need to eat plant-based meat. I mean, it's so simple to see. And again, an important note in this video is the voluntary imprisonment, right? When people are when they say, hey, we're going to voluntarily, we're not going to mandate anything, everybody should stay inside. They know that they've trained all of these, let's just call them what they are, liberals, these Democrats who are communists. They've trained them all to shame you if you don't agree with them or go along with them.
Billions of diseased and genetically modified mosquitoes are being purposefully released all around the globe, including right here in the US. They say it's to protect against deadly diseases, but for the first time in decades, malaria cases have been spotted in the States.
Concerns are growing as this marks the first time we're seeing local transmission in the US in 2 decades.
Conveniently, a man has announced a plan for a malaria vaccine. Weirdly enough, the man making the vaccine is the same man releasing the mosquitoes. And that man is Bill Gates.
The vaccine can have an effect against malaria.
If we're going to control these diseases in all the tropical cities of the world, it's going to require a lot of mosquitoes.
This story is being hidden and suppressed by mainstream news outlets. So-called fact checkers are blatantly lying, and I'll prove it here in a second. I can't say exactly why these news outlets are lying about this story, but Bill Gates' generosity could have something to do with it.
Bill Gates is the largest funder of trying to find these viruses in remote caves and bring them to big cities.
For the first time in 20 years, local malaria cases have begun surfacing in the US. At the release of this video, there have been 8 locally acquired malaria cases in the States.
Department of Health issued a statewide mosquito-borne illness advisory after confirming more cases of malaria.
These malaria cases only popped up after a tech company called Oxitec released billions of genetically modified mosquitoes into the wild.
Oxitec's lab, where tiny eggs are injected with a modified DNA strain, ultimately producing mosquitoes that have what's called a self-limiting gene.
Malaria in the US is extremely rare. It's also extremely deadly. It's so rare and deadly that just these 8 cases have prompted the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to deem it a public health emergency. And malaria isn't the only once eradicated disease that seems to have made a comeback. In Michigan, 2 people have tested positive for the Jamestown Canyon virus. Some states are reporting higher than usual numbers in eastern equine encephalitis as well. This virus is almost exclusively transmitted through, you guessed it, mosquitoes. So is heartworm. It's hard to make a direct correlation to the release of Oxitec's Frankenstein mosquitoes and the rise of these mosquito-borne illnesses, but the convenient timeline has definitely caught the attention of Americans. Location is turning heads too. The 2 states that reported malaria cases were Texas and Florida, 2 of the only states where Oxitec released their genetically engineered mosquitoes.
Oxitec began the process of releasing 140,000 male eggs in 6 locations along the Keys. That is part of a live experiment.
But Oxitec isn't the final boss. This random mosquito-loving tech startup isn't actually random at all. It's a vessel for Bill Gates. Oxitec is funded by the one and only Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The year before Oxitec began its mosquito experiment, Gates gave them $1.6 million. In 2022, Gates gave them another $18.3 million. All this money was specifically donated to fund mosquito field trials. The mosquito species Oxitec is releasing is called Aedes aegypti, which are known to carry diseases like yellow fever, Zika, and other deadly viruses. Supposedly, there is no risk that these specific mosquitoes can carry or spread malaria, yet the massive donations Gates gave to their mosquito field trials was specific to studying malaria.
Cars ended up killing people, electricity ended up electrocuting people. Almost nothing we've ever invented is 100% beneficial, and figuring out, okay, how do you deal with the safety issues? And we're seeing, as this technology becomes so pervasive, even a key tool of communication, there's a lot of regulatory issues that are having to be developed.
It's important to note here that the US is not the only place Gates is releasing altered blood-sucking disease-carrying insects. In other countries, like those in Africa and Latin America, Gates is open about the link between his mosquitoes and malaria.
The government of Djibouti teamed up with the company Oxitec to pursue an innovative approach to malaria control.
Oxitec is a biotechnology company, and we are the pioneers in using mosquitoes to fight mosquitoes.
Bill Gates is turning you, me, and the whole world into a gourmet buffet for billions of genetically engineered mosquitoes. And he's doing it with the approval of the Environmental Protection Agency.
Live experiment greenlit by the EPA.
He didn't get the approval of the people, though, and some aren't happy about it. The executive director of the Florida Keys Environmental Coalition said that the EPA forgot its middle name, protection. And he correctly pointed out that the EPA hasn't shown any investigation that proves this experimental insect won't create infinitely more problems than it will solve.
You don't know what's inside of this mosquito. There are 0 independent scientists that have corroborated anything that this vendor has said.
He couldn't be more right. These are genetically engineered blood-sucking insects carrying deadly diseases, and they're being released right into our backyard.
You and I aren't done yet, you little bastard!
I don't know about you, but this whole story is beginning to sound like the start of a bad apocalypse movie.
It sounds like a science fiction movie that I'm going to go to the movies to see.
It does. It sounds like
yeah.
Jurassic Park-ish, and you have these like genetically modified mosquitoes pitted against these wild mosquitoes.
Just listen to what I'm about to tell you. Oxitec genetically engineered male mosquitoes with a genetic kill switch, so that when they mate with the wild female mosquitoes, their offspring inherits the lethal gene and cannot reproduce or survive in the wild. That's the theory anyway. It seems pretty cut and dry. The bugs have a genetic kill switch. What could go wrong? Well, let's look at how this supposed kill switch works exactly. Oxitec engineered the mosquitoes to die in the absence of tetracycline, an antibiotic which is given to them in the lab to keep them alive just long enough to breed in the wild. The scientists designed them this way, assuming that the mosquitoes wouldn't have access to the antibody outside the lab. Basically, a failsafe to ensure that the mosquitoes don't survive in the real world and cause any unforeseen problems. But life finds a way. Get this, the antibiotics that the mosquitoes need to survive are known contaminants in bodies of water worldwide. This may sound like an alt version of the plot to Resident Evil, but I swear I'm not making this up. The EPA even acknowledges this. They've actually restricted the release of these mosquitoes near areas likely to have the antibody in the water. Oh, and just to add to the doomsday feel here, the experiment mosquitoes are called OX OX5034. And here is what the EPA says about the potential risk of OX5034 finding the antibody in the wild. To ensure that no OX5034 female mosquito offspring survive, they are restricting the release within 500 meters of potential antibody sources. 500 meters? There are only 500 meters between us and the survival of genetically modified mosquitoes? They go on to admit that there is, quote, a remote chance that they'll find the antibody in the wild and survive the mosquito lethal trait. Calling it a remote chance is very optimistic. There is already historic precedent to suggest that there is a very good chance these mosquitoes can easily travel way further than 500 meters after their release. And the government already knows this. They know this because they've already tried it. This mosquito obsession didn't start with Bill Gates. It started with the US military. Here is a FOIA request for an operation called Big Itch. And here is Operation Mayday. The US government has been experimenting with bugs for a while, like Operation Dropkick and Operation Quick Henry, which I've submitted FOIA requests for already. But right now we're going to focus on Operation Big Buzz. In 1955, the United States Army conducted an experiment called Operation Big Buzz. The goal was to find out if releasing disease-carrying mosquitoes into a population was a feasible method of entomological warfare. Entomological warfare is a form of biological warfare that uses bugs. To test their theory, the military dropped hundreds of thousands of uninfected mosquitoes into Savannah, Georgia, and tracked who they bit, if they reproduced, and how far they traveled. I could go on forever about the US government's obsession with mosquitoes. Like I said earlier, we've submitted several Freedom of Information Act requests to learn more about these various programs like Big Itch, Mayday, the bellwether tests, and many more operations related to entomological warfare experiments. Comment below if you think we should make a whole separate video about that. But what's really important to note here is the results of Operation Big Buzz. When all was said and done, the military collected mosquitoes as far away as 610 meters from the release site. 610 meters. That's 110 meters further than the 500 meter limit the EPA put on Oxitec. Oh, and in a separate report about Operation Mayday, the government said, quote, within a day, the mosquitoes had spread a distance of between 1 and 2 miles. Remember, Oxitec and Bill Gates are conducting field trials. We're all subjects in Bill Gates' reckless experiment. Just like the military did to Georgians in the 1950s, Bill Gates is doing it to us right now. And they're not experimenting on mosquitoes. They're experimenting on you and me and billions of unwilling participants all around the globe. Oxitec's history in mosquito experiments does not give me hope for the ones they're conducting right now. If you thought their experiments in Texas and Florida were bad, just wait till you hear what they did in Brazil. They released millions of genetically engineered mosquitoes in Jacobina, hoping to reduce the number of disease-carrying mosquitoes. But what happened instead was that the genetically engineered mosquitoes bred with the normal mosquitoes and affected the genetics of the whole population. Now there is a hybrid man-made mosquito population that scientists say is likely more robust than before. To the citizens of Jacobina, I'm truly sorry. That sucks. But I'm sure Oxitec learned from their mistakes, and that definitely won't happen here in the US. Bill Gates acts as if he is above the law of nature. He taunts Mother Earth and invests in dangerous experiments and watches as we suffer the consequences. He really is playing God, and it's kind of scary how much our institutions buy into this act.
What you have done to save millions of people's lives around the world.
Bill Gates isn't just throwing money at genetically modified mosquito experiments. He's also throwing money at those reporting on it, or those not reporting on it. A 2021 investigation by Mint Press revealed that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has donated over $300 million to legacy news outlets. These outlets include NPR, CNN, The Atlantic, NBC, PBS. The list goes on. And that's only the US-based outlets. Gates is known all around the world, and his mosquito experiments are taking place globally. The foreign news outlets Gates has funded include BBC, The Daily Telegraph, Al Jazeera, newspapers in France, Germany, and Spain, and so many more. Oh, and The Guardian, which in 2003 unironically called Gates Saint Bill. And it seems like the mainstream media will do anything to protect the sanctity of Saint Bill. Look at this AP News fact check that says Bill Gates isn't funding genetically modified mosquito experiments. Yet, Gates' own website lists the exact amount of money they donated to Oxitec's mosquito project. Weird, right? We called the Associated Press in an effort to clear some things up, but I'm not sure they were entirely receptive.
All right, let's call the Associated Press here.
If you are an AP customer, please press 0. If you are not an AP customer and have questions, please visit http://www.ap.org/contact us for further assistance. Goodbye.
Here we go. I guess I gotta submit a correction through their website.
Be sure to subscribe and we'll update you with any corrections they make to this fact check, if they make any at all.
We'll see what happens.
The hundreds of millions of dollars Saint Bill is dishing out isn't just going directly to the news outlets. He's giving money to charities closely aligned to the outlets, investigative journalism centers, press associations, and he's putting up money to directly train and teach new and upcoming journalists all over the world. The Gates Foundation has prompted scholarships, classes, and workshops through major learning institutions like Johns Hopkins University, University of California, Berkeley, the World Health Organization, and China's Tsinghua University. So no matter where you are in the world, you could theoretically train as a journalist through a Gates Foundation grant, get a job at a Gates-funded media outlet, and belong to a Gates-funded press association. No wonder they call him Saint Bill. He's providing them with their livelihood. Net Press was smart to note that all this funding is merely the tip of the iceberg. These are only money trails available to the public. The true amount of money Gates is pouring into the pockets of media giants is probably way, way higher. These zealots, framed as journalists, are paid by and fully devoted to the holy Saint Bill, and the crusade has only just begun.
Probably try not to underestimate us. If that causes fear, then maybe it's appropriate.
The mainstream media won't say a single negative thing about Bill Gates' attempt at playing God and manipulating nature, but they will praise the billionaire for his vaccine development programs. Yep, you heard that correctly. Gates is in the vaccine business, and he's not just investing in any vaccine.
We need vaccines for a lot of things, not just epidemics. We need a HIV vaccine, a tuberculosis vaccine, a malaria vaccine. All of those things are in the works.
In 2022, BioNTech, a company that has received millions of dollars from Bill Gates, began human trials to test a new malaria vaccine. Okay, wait. Let me get this straight. Bill Gates begins genetically modifying mosquitoes and releasing them into the wild to fight deadly diseases like malaria. Then malaria begins spiking in the US. Then we find out that Bill Gates has a malaria vaccine he's testing on humans? It's almost as if he benefits from people needing a malaria vaccine.
And what about the smart solutions, things like genetic manipulation? Where are we on that?
There's a technique called CRISPR that can change the mosquito DNA in a way that either the population goes down a lot or it doesn't carry this parasite. And the potential there to reduce the mosquito population and therefore locally get rid of the disease makes it a very promising addition. Now, malaria is, of course, transmitted by mosquitoes. I brought some here so you could experience this. We'll let those roam around the auditorium a little bit. There's no reason only poor people should have the experience.
Is Bill Gates profiting off of the vaccine industry? If you even ask this question, you're labeled a conspiracy theorist.
You know, we've given billions for vaccines and saved millions of lives. If you just kind of invert that and say, no, we're trying to make money from vaccines and not trying to save lives, that's a popular conspiracy theory.
But Bill Gates has said himself that he does profit from the vaccine industry. A lot.
You've invested $10 billion in vaccinations over the last 2 decades, and you figured out the return on investment for that, and it kind of stunned me. Can you walk us through the math?
It's been $100 billion overall that the world's put in. Our foundation is a bit more than $10 billion. But we feel there's been over a 20-to-1 return.
If you still don't believe that Bill Gates profits from the vaccine industry, ask investigative journalist Jordan Schachtel. He followed St. Bill's paper trail through the COVID-19 pandemic and found that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation made at least $300 million from investing in BioNTech, who was partnered with Pfizer to develop the COVID vax. That's just one small example of the money to be earned through big pharma and the medical industry. There is money in vaccines, and Bill Gates knows it. But his roots in the medical industry run deeper than vaccines. With money comes power and control, and Gates has the entire World Health Organization under his thumb. I'm not even exaggerating when I use the word control. That's really the most accurate way to describe the relationship between Gates and WHO. You see, over 80% of WHO's funding relies on donations, whether it's from independent donors, governments, philanthropic organizations, etc. These donations, however, are almost always specified for certain projects, meaning WHO can't freely decide how to use the money. In fact, WHO only has full control over a quarter of its budget. The World Health Organization is forced to do the bidding of rich donors. The question really becomes, who's in control of who? The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation alone is responsible for over 88% of the total amount donated by philanthropic foundations. Other contributors don't even come close to that number, like the Bloomberg Foundation, which donates 3.5%, and the Rockefeller Foundation, which donates 0.8%. The Gates Foundation has consistently ranked among the top WHO contributors for several years.
Certainly the finances should be handled by the rich countries. A lot of those resources could work on other infectious diseases, measles and malaria. I see it as a pretty wise investment. For the developing countries, this surveillance will be good for them.
St. Bill is no saint. Is he really doing all of this out of the kindness of his heart, just for the benefit of humanity? Or is he doing it for the benefit of himself and his wallet? If it's the former, he's doing a poor job at showing it. Mosquitoes are already annoying enough. We don't need them to be genetically modified. We have no clue what kind of repercussions humanity and the environment will face because of this. We shouldn't use the entire world as a field test. Yet, that's what's happening. At the end of Operation Big Buzz, the military provided advice on how to defend against foreign entomological warfare and mosquito invasions. They said we should do things like cover up so mosquitoes can't bite you, thoroughly spray insecticide over infected areas, stay indoors, blah, blah, blah. I'd just rather not let Bill Gates dictate whether or not I stay indoors and wear a face mask. We've been through that. Let's try to stop this madness before it gets out of hand. And the first step in doing that is exposing that it's happening. The only good piece of advice that Operation Big Buzz has to offer is right here on page 60. Panic is one of the most important things to prevent. Now that I agree with. Don't panic. Act. Share this video. I'm tired of being an experiment.
Why don't we have a vaccine for malaria? Those are the things that I push forward. I wouldn't say I get angry, but I'm really impatient that we're not moving as fast as I'd like.
1, 2, 3, 4. I told you so. I told you. I told you so. I told you. Remember when I told you about 9/11? Remember when I told you about Building 7? Remember when I told you about the fluoride in the water? Yes, I did. Remember when I told you about the New World Order? Remember that? Remember when I told you about the chemtrails in the sky? Remember when I told you that NASA was full of lies? Remember when I told you about the ultra mind control? Well, I just want to say that I told you so, yeah. Remember when I told you about 432 hertz, that is, and what 440 can do to you? It hurts my ears. Remember when I told you about the vaccine agenda? Yes, I did. And that Michelle Obama is a transgender. Yes, he is. The dinosaur fraud, the climate change scam, and yes, Sandra Bullock is also a man. Remember when I told you that there ain't no globe? Well, I just want to say that I told you so. 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 Yeah. Remember when I told you about the TV flicker rate? And how it puts your brain in an alpha state? Remember when I told you about germ theory? Remember when I told you about gravity? Remember that? Remember when I told you about Paul McCartney? Remember when I told you about direct energy? Remember when I told you about Monsanto? Well, I just want to say that I told you so. 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 Yeah. Remember when I told you about the mainstream media? Your so-called celebrities and pedophilia. Remember that? Child trafficking and adrenochrome. Remember when I told you about the Georgia Guidestone? Remember when I told you about the false flag operation? Remember when I told you about 5G radiation? Remember that I told you that? Well, I just want to say that I told you so. I told you so. I told you so. I told you so. I told you so.